Hello, my name is Chad Marxen and I'm a junior philosophy major at Pepperdine University. In my paper, Empiricism and the Argument from Queerness, I examine an argument for moral skepticism. I contend that the argument is dependent upon empiricism and that if this argument is successful, then it demonstrates that there are many other areas in which we do not have knowledge, such as metaphysics, math, and logic. In essence, I demonstrate that Mackey's argument proves too much. One can claim that we don't have knowledge in the given areas, but it seems that we are rational in holding that we do have knowledge in the given areas, and that therefore we can reject the strong empiricist foundation of the argument. In J.L. Mackey's work on metaethics, ethics, inventing right and wrong, he offers two main arguments against the view that they are objective moral values and duties that are known by humans. He defines objective as something that is true independently of what any humans believe. Values describe what is good or bad, and duties describe what one ought to do, in essence, which actions are obligatory. The argument that I consider concerns the queerness of objective moral values and duties. Mackey offers both an epistemological and a metaphysical argument from queerness. I take the epistemological argument to be much stronger than his metaphysical argument from queerness. I examine the former in closer detail, and in the next section I will provide a formalized version of the argument with a brief defense of the premises. The first premise goes, for all propositions P and agents A, if empiricism is true, then A does not know that P, where P denotes any proposition that A believes about objective moral values and duties. The second premise is the antecedent of the first, and it is that empiricism is true. The third concludes via modus ponens that A does not know that P, where P denotes any proposition about objective moral values and duties. Mackey describes the prima facie tension between empiricism and one's knowledge of objective moral values and duties as he writes, if there were objective values, then they would be entities or qualities or relations of a very strange sort, utterly different from anything else in the universe. Correspondingly, if we were aware of them, it would have to be by some special faculty of moral perception or intuition, utterly different from our ordinary ways of knowing everything else. Mackey proceeds by claiming that some sort of moral intuition is very implausible and ought to be rejected as the means by which we gain knowledge of objective moral values and duties. Further, given that we cannot gain knowledge of objective moral values and duties through sensory perception or reflection on our perceptions, we cannot gain knowledge of objective moral values and duties. One could question whether Mackey is right about the previous point, but I will not question this assertion for the remainder of the paper. Mackey presupposes a strong form of empiricism and does not explicitly define its meaning, but the following definition that I give seems to cover the essence of his assumption. I define empiricism as follows. We have no source of knowledge in S or the concepts we use in S other than sense experience. In the previous sentence, S denotes any subject of inquiry such as metaphysics, history, and sociology. Therefore, all of our concepts must be learned through sense perceptions or through reflections on them. I show that given Mackey's reasons for accepting the first premise, he ought to accept many other premises that are similar to it, which in turn produce some very unfavorable consequences. I conclude that one may either accept the consequences of empiricism or reject the strong empiricist principle upon which the argument rests. Mackey predicts a sort of response like this, and he writes, the only adequate reply to it would be to show how, on empiricist foundations, we can construct an account of ideas and beliefs and knowledge that we have of all these matters. If some supposed metaphysical necessities or essences resist such treatment, then they should be included, along with objective values, among the targets of the argument from queerness. In the following section, I demonstrate that objective moral values and duties are not the only targets of Mackey's argument from queerness. First, consider the phenomenon of identity over time. The following argument comes from Bill Vallicella. Consider a scenario in which I walk into my room on Monday and see a green banana. I return several days later and see that the banana is yellow. A few days later I return and the banana is brown. In this case, it seems that the banana objectively lost and acquired properties as time passed. But in terms of empiricism, how does one know that the initial banana is numerically the same as the banana on the different days? It is consistent with one's perceptions that a different banana is substituted for the previous banana each day. It seems that one's sensory perceptions, in conjunction with one's ability to reason about the experience, is not sufficient for this type of knowledge. Suppose someone objected by claiming that the only reason the individual does not perceive the identity of the banana is because one has ceased looking at the object. But this is mistaken. It does not seem that one loses knowledge of an object's continuity through time if one blinks. Suppose one grants the previous objection. Imagine instead that I take a drug that allows me to stare at the banana for a week without blinking. Even then the empiricist cannot say that I perceive identity over time, since it is consistent with my perception that every single moment the banana that I saw ceases to exist while a new banana comes into existence ex nihilo faster than my senses can perceive. A perdurantist could object by claiming that there are only temporal parts of an object, and therefore that we do not perceive identity over time since each temporal part is not identical with each other. But this objection is mistaken because the perdurantist will still want to say that we can perceive that the temporal parts of the banana all are part of the same object. If this is right, then even the perdurantist should think that we perceive a sort of identity over time. The empiricist can respond by claiming that we have no knowledge of identity over time, or that there is no identity over time. But then it seems that one could rationally reject this. The empiricist could also claim that we have some sort of identity detector. But then it seems that the defender of objective moral values and duties can likewise claim that we have a moral detector, which is the very thing that Mackey finds implausible. A preliminary problem for empiricism is explaining how one can know that induction is a reasonable form of inference. Induction is an inference from the claim all observed F's are G to all F's are G. But what justifies induction on empiricism? It cannot be known a priori since it is not an analytic truth. Can one perceive the truth of induction through one's senses? It seems not. If one cannot perceive the truth of it through one's senses, then it must be derived from reasoning about previous sense experience. But what collective past experience could be used to derive it? Maybe one could claim that, although it has been presupposed in the past, it has been confirmed later on. Since it has been proven true in all observed cases, it is true in all cases. But this is viciously circular reasoning, since one is using induction in order to prove induction. One could claim that we do not have knowledge of it, but that we will still assume it and continue to do so unless it has been shown to be a problematic form of reasoning. However, this claim appears to be in tension with Mackey's strong claims concerning empiricism. It seems that Mackey would not accept any sort of pragmatic justification. Also, if it is rational to believe in a certain a priori claims that are not derivable from sense experience, then it seems that the defender of objective moral values and duties can make the same sort of defense. Another problem for empiricism is explaining how we come to knowledge of causal principles. How do we know that everything that begins to exist has a cause? How do we know that every event has a cause? It seems that based on empiricism, the best one can say is that in one's experience, one has no evidence that the causal principle has been violated. But even if this is true, it seems false that the mere absence of evidence against a proposition is thereby evidence for the truth of a proposition. Why does confirmation of a principle give evidence for the principle in question? And does it really even confirm the principle? If one claims that one is an intuition that this is the case, this may be fine for someone who rejects empiricism, but for someone who doesn't, this is just as mysterious as postulating a moral detector. Further, given quantum mechanics, some scientists and philosophers have suggested that there are some uncaused events, or even events that begin to exist without a cause. One could claim that one is inductive justification for the principle, but as it was shown in the last section, the empiricist does not have epistemic justification to accept induction. If the empiricist admits that he is just assuming it, then it does not seem that induction can provide any sort of justification for the individual. For instance, suppose I assume without any justification that if my roommate is alive, then Pluto does not exist. I continue by demonstrating that my roommate is alive, which is analogous to showing that all observed F's are G. Then I claim that I have evidence that Pluto does not exist. Clearly I have no such evidence that Pluto does not exist. By the same token, the fact that induction provides warrant for a given proposition is inconsequential if one has no warrant for thinking that induction is true in the first place. Therefore, one who continues in affirming empiricism must also reject knowledge of causal principles. Another problem for empiricism is explaining how one can know mathematical truths. Consider the truth that 2 + 2 = 4. An empiricist could claim that in all our experiences, the addition of two entities with two other entities has entailed four entities. Since we have all this experience, we can infer that 2 plus 2 equals 4. The problem with this sort of justification is that it relies upon induction, which empiricism cannot give an account for. If induction does not provide justification on empiricism, then it will not provide support for mathematics. Perhaps one could say that in all of one's experience, the proposition 2 plus 2 equals 4 has never shown to be false. But once again, the fact that a proposition has not been shown to be false does not demonstrate that it is true. Further, the mere confirmation of the truth only gives warrant if one has justification that confirmation gives warrant. It does not seem that empiricists could gain knowledge of an a priori truth such as this. An empiricist could retreat and claim that he clearly perceives the truth of mathematics. If this perception is a rational intuition, then empiricism clearly rules this out as a source of warrant. If this perception is a perception of the physical world, or reasoning about it, then it does not seem that one can perceive mathematical truth as the individual is claiming. In addition to mathematics, it is difficult to explain how one comes to knowledge of truths about logic. Consider the law of non-contradiction. How could one come to knowledge of it through sensory experience or through reasoning about sensory experience? One may have never perceived the contradiction, but this does not provide warrant that there are not any true contradictions. One cannot use induction since induction is already suspect on empiricist grounds. In fact, it seems that one has evidence against the law of non-contradiction. Consider the problem of free will. It seems that there are strong arguments that humans are morally responsible, and strong arguments that freedom and therefore moral responsibility are incompatible with indeterminism and determinism. Given that one cannot receive warrant for the law of non-contradiction, and that one has warrant that a contradiction is true, it seems that one ought to believe that we are both morally responsible and not morally responsible. If this is the case, then one is again left with the choice of keeping empiricism and dropping the law of non-contradiction, or dropping empiricism. Another difficult area for empiricism is our knowledge of necessary truths. How do we know that necessarily the law of non-contradiction is true, or that necessarily 2 plus 2 equals 4? Suppose that we could learn through reasoning about our sense experiences that the law of non-contradiction and 2 plus 2 equals 4 are both true. Even if we were able to discover these truths through sensory perceptions, it seems impossible that we could discover that both of these are necessarily true. It is not just that we know that they are true, but that they are necessarily true. In essence, they could not be false. They are not mere contingent truths. No matter how much we investigated the universe and contemplated one's experience of the universe, it does not seem that one could derive warrant for the claim that the law of non-contradiction is necessarily true from said experiences. In conclusion, in this paper I have outlined Mackey's epistemological argument from queerness, which concludes that no one has knowledge of objective moral values and duties. I have sought to demonstrate that given the truth of empiricism, there are many other subjects which we would not have knowledge, namely identity over time, induction, causal principles, mathematics, logic, and necessary truths. Therefore, unless one has stronger reasons for accepting empiricism than for thinking that one has knowledge in the given areas, one can reject the strong sort of empiricism that Mackey assumes. Thank you.